Wisconsin state capital programming is made possible with support from Quick Trip, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139. Wisconsin Eye is an independent, nonprofit public affairs broadcast network. Watch Wisconsin Eye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363 and at wisi.org.
And would the clerk please take the roll?
Representative Wickers.
Here.
Representative Fiesfeld. Here. Representative Allen. Representative Ramthun. Here. Representative Magnifici. Here. Representative Murphy. Here. Representative Hebel. Here. Representative Pope. Here. And Representative Cabrera is excused.
And Representative Allen is on his way. We will hold the roll open if those who aren't here, if they are, so they'll be able to vote until 10. The purpose of the executive session, we're going to start with the pledge. Representative Hebel. The purpose of the executive session is to vote on Assembly Joint Resolution 16 and Assembly Bill 132. Could everybody check their cell phones to make sure that they are silenced? The first item of business is Assembly Joint Resolution 16. Could we have Ledge Counsel give a brief summary?
Sure. Assembly Joint Resolution 16 constitutes the state's application to Congress for a convention under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. The convention would be for the purpose of proposing a constitutional amendment that would set term limits for members of Congress. The joint resolution specifies that it may not be added to the applications relating to any other subject.
Thank you for that. Do we have a motion for adoption? We have a first with Representative Fiesfeld, Representative Magnifici, second. Any discussion? Representative Ramthun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would simply like to say that I acknowledge the level of mild controversy that might be associated with this, but I would simply say this. Congress refuses to obey its own rules. It refuses to pass a balanced budget. It refuses to read fully the bills they pass on our behalf. If not now, when? The vote is green. Thank you, sir.
Representative Murphy.
As you probably have guessed, I'm going to be a no on this bill. And the reason I'm a no on this bill probably pertains a lot to what Representative Ramthun just said. The federal government refuses to balance its budget. It refuses to do a number of things that he would probably like them to do. And I don't think this bill is going to change any of that. If I thought that this was really the linchpin or the fulcrum that was going to somehow change the federal government, I might give it some second thought, but I really don't think this is what's going to change things there. And for that reason, I will be a no on this bill.
Representative Hebel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will also be voting no on this bill. I believe democracy allows for us to elect the representatives that we would like to have, and an artificial term elimination takes away that aspect of democracy, which I believe is so important. During the testimony for this bill, it was lengthy and somewhat repetitive, but what kept coming through was the idea that this bill, if passed, is not going to solve the problem. We have funding of elections with the Citizens United, which greatly outproportions the ability of representatives to carry out the wishes of their constituents. And there are much more serious problems than term limits that should be addressed if we really want to get to the heart of the problem. This bill will not solve that problem, and so I'll be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those reasons and others, I too am voting no on it. But I do have a question for Ledge Council, and maybe this was revealed to us during testimony, but I'm just curious. If enacted, is this retroactive to the people who are already there, so that, for example, Mitch McConnell is gone tomorrow, or do they have X number of terms to serve going forward?
So this amendment doesn't, or this joint resolution doesn't specify that. That could be something that the convention proposes as part of an amendment.
Okay. Wishful thinking on my part, no doubt. Thank you.
Representative Thiesfeld.
If this vote had come up for me, say, 15 years ago, I would have been a no. In between now and then, I've had opportunity, of course, to serve here. I've had opportunity to serve on the city council in Fond du Lac, and it was prior to my time in the city council in Fond du Lac that, I was teaching government at a high school, and I taught my students that we don't have term limits by and large across the country, and people get to ultimately make the choice, and that certainly still is the way that it is. But I think something that gets overlooked is what I discovered when I was on the city council, and that is in Fond du Lac, they're one of the few municipalities in the state that actually has term limits. You could serve 3 two-year terms on the city council, and you had to step out for at least 2 years. And so I finished up there before I came here when I was in my last term. I would not have been able to run again. And in my time there, I recognized the wisdom that my predecessors had there when they had instituted that, because what they had occur, which I think is the problem that this is trying to get at, is you had these people that were in for just term after term after term after term. And it wasn't so much the length of time they were there that was the problem. The problem is that they kind of developed their own little community within the government. They were real chummy with the staff, and we all know that the people who it's probably hardest to disagree with are our friends. We want to agree with our friends. And there was this kind of relationship that would go on that would make it difficult to enact anything in opposition to what the city staff wanted to have. And so that was put in place, and I think it's been a pretty effective change. Now, that's a city council. We're moving up here to a much higher level. You hear all the talk of the swamp and what that all means. I'm sure everything we hear about that isn't true, but I'm sure there is some of it that's true. I think that's undeniable. This is to attack that. It's to get the people to have their representatives representing them again instead of the bureaucracy that is in place in government. And that's why I will be supportive of that. I see my friend Sandy suddenly has her hand go up. That's all I have.
Representative Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for Representative Thiesfeld. Who put those people in office? Were they appointed, or did the people elect them?
Well, I think you're asking a question you know the answer to
yes,
already.
Yes, I do.
Obviously, the people did that. But you know as well as I do that the power of incumbency is a pretty strong factor. And it's also a benefit to have a wide range of opinions come in and out of office. Not necessarily just from the same party, but from different people within that same party.
And yet we have municipalities that have open seats because nobody is willing to run.
And that is a problem also. I certainly can acknowledge that as well.
Although that was not the problem in Fond du Lac recently. They had 11 people. They actually had to have a primary.
Yeah, okay.
So thank you for the question.
I would like to make a comment as well. I, like Representative Thiesfeld, have opposed term limits for Congress for some time, and it wasn't until very recently that I saw that there is something going on in Congress that needs to be fixed. I don't think this bill fixes it, so I agree with those who are opposing the bill. But it is a grassroots movement that is moving throughout the country. Something is getting done. They are exposing problems with lobbyists and incumbency and big money in big government in Washington, D.C., and this is a grassroots movement that will expose, continue to expose, and maybe filter out some of that. If I saw that those that objected had substantive alternatives to this, and they had a momentum with a grassroots movement, then I would probably be a no on this bill if they had something better that was going on and had movement. 2 years ago, we were at a $19 trillion deficit. Now we're at 29. It happened really quick. That's one of the criteria that helped change my mind, that something needs to be done and something quickly. So I would be a yes on this bill because it is a movement to do something, when the others that are criticizing this movement have certainly passion and you could even say some conservative thought, but they are behind the grassroots effort to curtail some of those things that they're complaining about in Congress. Representative Rantham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm not surprised about the extended conversation on this, and it's fine. It's welcomed, and I appreciate it. I would simply like to add to my earlier comments that, and you touched on it, Mr. Chairman, status quo and learned behavior must be addressed. And I qualify that, too, by, on a personal note, in my private sector life, being in an area of professionalism that involved operational service delivery, whether it's products or services or both. When you deliver to meet and exceed expectation of the people who are buying your products, you have to be 99.99% all the time, if not 100%. And in the process of delivery, you have to get right person, right role, right time. And there is usually an evolution factor that occurs where people come and go. And sometimes, you know, the roof caves in and the skies open up and everyone goes, what are we going to do? Bill's not here anymore to save us anymore. What happens is people rise to the occasion and you find diamonds in the rough and franchise players as a result of the effort to have to exercise to continue the effort for quality. That's what turned me with term limits as well. I used to believe that elections were the term limit mechanism. I don't believe that anymore because the status quo and the learned behavior and the money and the in-the-seat influence overrides some of the common sense that should be taking place. It doesn't happen that way. So I just really wanted to say that there's a value here that I know in time we'll see when we start having movement of personnel. You're going to find diamonds in the rough. You're going to find franchise players, and we just need to have that continuation going. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hebel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I enjoy the discussion that we're having here. I actually think passage of this joint resolution will make it worse, the concerns that we have about the balanced budget. I think it'll actually make it worse because we will have no experience of any great degree in the houses. You had brought up the issue, if there was other options available to improve the situation in Washington, I would like to hear those. Well, in my opening comments, I talked to you about Citizens United and the fact that the funding of our elections is totally inappropriate. Our elected people are elected because of special interests, because of dark money, because of control outside of the democratic process. That's one area we could help much better than this term limits. The second area is to make voting available to every eligible voter, make it easy to vote. We are at 50%, sometimes 54, maybe 56 in a big election. We should be at 95 to 100% in terms of turnout. If we really believe in democracy, we should do everything we can to make it easy for eligible voters to vote. You know what's going on in our country right now? Every state is trying to make it more difficult to vote, put in more hurdles, and that is anti-democratic to the greatest degree. So you ask for examples of how we can make this a better country and a better democracy, make voting easier, and get dark money out of elections. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have to say, I agree with Representative Hebel on where money is getting into our election system. And, you know, when it gets to the point where money is actually being donated, contributed to the polling places, to the cities, I think that's when, you know, we've really gone a step too far in money and politics, and we've seen it with 5 cities here in Wisconsin, so that is a problem. But, you know, earlier Representative Pope asked like council for some guidance on what this law would be, and I don't know for sure, Representative Pope, if you really didn't know, or if you're just trying to point out the fact that there really is no specifics here. We don't know if this term limits would cover the people that are in office now. Would they be grandfathered? Representative Thiesfeld brought up on the city council it was 2 3-year terms or 3 2-year terms or whatever it was, and then they were off for a while, but then they could come back. Is this something that could happen? Sure. I mean, anything can happen here. This is really about voting for a vision of something that may come about, but Representative Hebel's vision, Representative Pope's vision, Representative Thiesfeld's vision, or Representative Murphy's vision are completely different. And we don't even know what we're voting for. And so we're voting for something, and all of us have our fingers double crossed because we're hoping that it might be something that's good. And we don't know that. I would feel much more comfortable if there were a debate in Congress and some type of legislation or some amendment proposal came forward. If I saw what it was, I can support it. As legislators here, we take up bills and we debate those bills and we know exactly what we're talking about. This is just a pie in the sky that I think lends itself to an awful lot of mischief and really flat-out corruption within the process of somebody trying to come up with something that's going to advantage them. And I am very afraid of this process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I could add, in the meantime, the sky has fallen, and now the ground is sinking. So when you have a solution, we'll bring that to this committee, and we'll vote on that. And hopefully your solution moves faster than this solution, but something has to be done. So I will be voting yes. Representative Pope.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate allowing the discussion because I'm finding it very interesting. Representative Rampton made a point that I could use, which is people expect 100% delivery of goods and services, and that's what experience brings. And I think just assuming that a term ends a person's experience and value in what they're giving as congressional representatives is pretty wasteful and foolish. And then in the final, I would have to say that democracy depends on the ballot box. If we can't trust the people to vote for what they want to represent them, then we are no longer a democracy. We've changed it. So if we're going to legislate who serves, that's not how democracy functions. And I have to agree with Representative Hebel. Citizens United is an answer. Repealing Citizens United is an absolute answer to getting big money out of the elections. Thank you.
Hearing no other questions, would the clerk call the roll for adoption of Assembly Joint Resolution 16?
Representative Wickers.
Aye.
Representative Thiesfeld. Representative Rampton. Representative Magnifici. Representative Murphy. No. Representative Hebel. No. Representative Pope. No. Leave the roll open.
And we will leave the roll open until Representative Allen gets here, which should be soon. We will now go to AB 132. Would Ledge Council give a summary?
Sure. The bill requires government entities, public and private schools, certain daycare providers, and healthcare providers, when sending mail, to enclose and seal any information that discloses a person's immunization status or that would otherwise allow someone to infer a person's immunization status. The provision in the bill would be added to the chapter of the statutes relating to control of communicable diseases. There's a general penalty provision in that chapter for violations of the chapter of up to 30 days in prison or a $500 fine or both.
There are no amendments. Do we have a motion for passage? No. We have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Representative Hebel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be voting no on this bill. I believe it's unnecessary. We have HIPAA laws that require confidentiality in all medical records, and we all deal with that on a daily basis, whether it's my charts or whatever it is. If a violation occurs, if in fact these cards, postcards, or unsealed envelopes are going out, there's an enforcement mechanism currently in existence, either through the state or through the HIPAA, that would require that those violations be corrected immediately and that penalties can be imposed currently. So this is a feel-good piece of legislation. It makes sense, but it's unnecessary because the law is already in place to protect us through the HIPAA requirements. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Hearing none, would the clerk read the roll for passage of AB 132?
Representative Wickers.
Aye.
Representative Thiesfeld. Aye. Representative Rampton. Aye. Representative Magnifici. Aye. Representative Murphy. Aye. Representative Hebel.
No.
Representative Pope.
That concludes this executive hearing. May the force be with you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.